Good morning, Garland Nixon here. It's a Thursday morning, so I'm hanging out with Scott Ritter, and we got one or two things to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Scott Ritter, and it is Thursday morning. One or two things going on, as you probably already know. Uh, Before we get going, it is very important if you want to follow Scott's good works that you go to scottritter.com. That's scottritter.com. As it's spelled, as it sounds. You can follow everything that's going on with Scott there. Also follow Scott on Telegram. And when you go to scottritter.com, there are means there to donate. And as you can hear, hungry mouths barking in the background. As you know, you see people online, you see us talking and doing all kinds of stuff. But everybody's got to survive also. So it would be great when you get there if you can both share Scott's website, scottritterextra.com, and donate in any way and means that you are able. Thank you very much for those who can donate. Even if you can't donate, share it on all your social media platforms. And also, as I always say, make sure you put a little note to people asking them to donate, and they appreciate Scott's work. Help keep it going. All right, Scott, let's get going. I guess we start with the big story. So everybody's heard about or everything that we can possibly hear about the Iran missile attack on Israel. Have you gotten any new information, anything that you think that people may have not heard, that people may not know, that you find, or a particular perspective on it that you think people may find interesting?
Well, I think the first thing that people need to know is that this missile attack was not designed to be punitive in nature. This missile attack was designed to send a message. And every aspect of this missile attack, from the launch to it hit, the kind of missiles used, everything, the targets, was designed to send a message. Whether or not the politicians are willing to accept the message being sent is a different question. But I think people need to understand that Iran, the message Iran sent is as follows. We can hit any place we want in Israel, anytime we want, with as much firepower as we want, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And they demonstrated that by applying techniques that stripped bare the notion that there is a effective missile defense shield over Israel. I'm reading into this. I can't say that I received this information from the Iranians.
Right.
They would be loath to tell me to begin with. But having studied missiles for a number of years, I took a look at the mix of missiles being fired, and associated them with the firing units, etc., and have come away with the conclusion that Iran has found the perfect mix of missiles designed to confuse and disrupt the missile defense shield to the extent that basically the missiles that were intercepted were designed to be intercepted. And the missiles that hit the target were designed to hit the target. And what Iran showed is that we have your number. And they proved it. The Israelis are very good at reverse engineering problems. I worked with them for many years and worked with them to reverse engineer the Iraqi Scud missile problem, every aspect of it, operationally, from a procurement standpoint, manufacturing standpoint, technical standpoint. So I'm confident that they have applied that skill set to what occurred on Monday. And They know exactly what I'm saying because I just know these people. And I know that they've prepared briefs that have gone up to their chain of command saying there's literally nothing we can do. We've spent almost $1 trillion building a missile defense shield that cannot defend us. There's no tweak that can be done. There's no adjustment can be done. Um, the Iranians have our numbers, and if we do anything against Iran, understand that if they choose to hit any target in Israel, it's gone. They made that very clear. Iran wasn't looking to have a mass casualty event. They weren't looking to kill anybody. In fact, the only reason why people died is freak accidents. One of the missiles shot down by Jordanian air defense fell on Jericho and crushed a man. I think another person died from a missile fragment, again, from a missile that had been shot. Iranian missiles that landed where Iran intended them to land killed nobody, and that was the Iranian intent. And then, and I need to throw this in too. For those people out there who call the Iranians and Hezbollah bloodthirsty, this, that, and the other thing, I would just ask you to take pause for a second and think about what is the moral foundation of Hezbollah and Iran. And it's principled adherence to the Shia faith. It's a branch of Islam. But if you go and study what the Ayatollahs study in the Shia faith, one of the things that comes off straight up is the absolute principled stance the Shia take regarding killing innocents. They just don't do it. They don't, sometimes it happens inadvertently, things of that nature, but the idea that the Shia would deliberately target civilians to commit mass murder is absurd. But again, we don't take the time to do that. The Iranians sent so many signals here about who they are, what their goals and objectives are. I even believe they sent a signal to Israel, and I could get in trouble for this because people will disagree, and I know Iranians may disagree because they don't want to admit it, but they sent a signal to Israel about what targets they may accept Israel to strike in retaliation to bring this to an end. And I'll let the Israelis figure that one out, but let me just say, if it deals with ballistic missile production of a certain kind of missile, not the Fatah, you might be right. This is a very dangerous game that's being played, though. Iran did not want to undertake this. This was only done after very serious debate where the hardliners had to be shouted down by the realists, and that the military had to ensure that its actions conformed with the totality of what Iran, the Islamic Republic, is. Not just a purely military act of retaliation designed to achieve X, Y, and Z, but there was a huge political element attached to this. And if you've taken a look, Israel hasn't struck. Now they say they'll strike after Rosh Hashanah. I'm sure I butchered that, the Jewish New Year. But where are they going to strike? And here's the other thing that's factored in here: the United States. Israel right now has crossed every red line when it comes to America. I think Israel needs to understand that the Biden administration is facing the perfect storm of everything that's going to destroy the Kamala Harris candidacy. The hurricane response it's humiliating for the Harris. It's despicable. Handing out $750 to people at a time when you're handing out $10,000 to $13,000 prepaid Visa cards to illegal immigrants or sending $7.9 billion to Ukraine, $8 billion to Israel to fight wars we don't need to be fighting, is indefensible, and they can't defend this one. The longshoreman strike is going to, unless it gets finished soon, is going to gut the American economy in the lead up to a holiday season. Again, I reflect on James Carville's famous words that he posted on the door of the war room of the Clinton campaign in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. Americans will vote their pocketbooks above all else. And the longshoremen's strike is going to destroy the American economy. And now, if Israel, in defiance of the instructions given to it by the United States, attacks Iran in a manner which impacts its nuclear infrastructure or its oil production infrastructure, Iran will shut down Middle East oil production. That's 10% of the world's oil production, but it has everything to do with energy security. And given the speculative nature of the oil market, prices will literally go through the roof overnight. Now, again, we're coming into a holiday season. This is the period of time where people use their hard-earned money to do things that make them happy with their families. Every religion is involved. And you're now going to make gasoline $12 a gallon?
The winter, when people need heating oil.
When they need heating oil and they can't afford it. When all the money they were saving for these family times is gone, evaporates, and now there's nothing, and now they're destitute. How many Americans are one missed paycheck away from losing everything? You could literally put this country into a Great Depression redux if this gets out of control. That will again be the end of the Harris campaign. So now, what is Israel going to do? And America needs to come face to face to the reality that we have subordinated ourselves to the policy priorities of a government that has been declared to be apartheid and genocidal by the International Court of Justice, a government that shows zero regard for human life, a government that, in order to kill one man, Hassan Nasrallah, who, by the way, apparently had just agreed to a ceasefire, a man who had embraced peace and said, this is the direction we want to go, no war, peace. And they killed him. But in the process of killing him, killed 700 to 1,000 innocent Lebanese civilians. Total disregard for international law, the rules of anything. And we've subordinated ourselves to this murderous regime. It's time for America to reevaluate its relationship with Israel. And I mean to have a sit down, come to Jesus moment with yourselves. Is this really the nation we want to ally ourselves with? Are they our friends? And the answer is no across the board. No. And we'll see what Israel does. But remember, this is about Benjamin Netanyahu's political survival. It's not about the survival of Israel. Israel is actually committing suicide as we speak. Anybody who thinks, listen to Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, and these other Israeli Zionist murderous thugs out there saying now's the time to take down Iran. Hezbollah has been mortally wounded. Hamas is gone. Really? Go ask the soldiers fighting in Gaza right now how crippled Hamas is. Go ask the Israeli soldiers getting butchered in southern Lebanon how crippled Hamas is. Please don't confuse restraint with weakness. Ask Israel how weak Iran is when those missiles impacted down. I know they've spun it. Nothing happened, this, that, and the other thing. Everybody around the world saw the flight of the bumblebees over Israeli airspace and watched as they impacted on the targets they were intended to hit. Everybody knows what happened. And no amount of spin can change that. It's Israel that's weak. They've done, look, sports analogy. Do you win championships with trick plays? The answer is no. You can win one game with a trick play properly done at one point in time. But if your entire, play sheet is trick plays, you're going to get crushed. Israel has executed a series of trick plays. The pagers blowing up. The targeted assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. Trick plays. Hassan Nasrallah has been preparing for his death for decades. Israel tried to kill him in 2006. They've been trying to kill him every year since then. Hassan Nasrallah has made peace with that reality. He has said, I am a living martyr. My death is already preordained. I will be martyred. And Hezbollah has prepared for this. It's not as though his death, which is tragic and a huge blow to the people of Lebanon, to Hezbollah, to anybody who wants a peaceful resolution to this. And remember, Hassan Nasrallah is the guy that said yes to a ceasefire. Just want to remind you that. That's his last act, was to say yes to a ceasefire. And all the guarantees that come with it, they were given by America when Israel assassinated him. But to think that his death somehow crippled Hezbollah, a resistance organization that has been preparing since 2006 for this very moment. They've thought through every contingency. There's nothing that they haven't considered. The redundancy has been built into their system. Hezbollah is not weak. Hezbollah is stronger than ever because they've absorbed the blows of the Israelis, and they are still there. And Israel's finding out as they try to launch incursions into southern Lebanon. So, the takeaway here is that anybody who thinks that Israel has the upper hand is going to be sadly disappointed. And Americans need to understand that what Israel is doing has a detrimental impact on us as a people. It's going to destroy our economy. It's already destroyed our reputation around the world. There's a reason why the global south has gravitated to BRICS, Russia, China, India, and gravitated away from the United States. It's because what we stand for is war. What we stand for is death. What we stand for is destruction. We don't stand for peace. We don't stand for stability. We don't stand for good relations among men. We're the opposite. We are the evil that walks the world. And one of the reasons why we can be classified as evil is because of our continuing embrace of the most evil entity on the planet today, which is the state of Israel.
You know what's interesting, and that is the claims by our leaders that we are standing with Ukraine, that we are standing with Israel, that we are supporting Ukraine, that we are supporting Israel. And I've said this, one of the things that you judge a relationship by is the outcome, right? And I've told the story. I have a cousin who and he laughs about it. At his younger years, he was drinking, he was partying, he was cavorting, he was running, he was doing everything he had no business doing. And he wasn't a happy guy. We all were like, this guy's gonna, he's going a freight train to hell. You can see he was out of control, right? And I've said this story. And he met this woman, and she calmed him down. Now, I'm not a religious guy myself, but she took him to church, and she calmed him. She turned down the volume. She got him back in college. She got him, you know what I mean? She got this guy calmed down. And he got, you know what I mean? And kind of straightened and calmed down. There's old Frank, my cousin Frank. And we're like, geez, we never thought anything could calm this guy down and get him. He's a new guy, new man, right? Walks around with a tie and jacket and things like that, right? Never thought I'd see it. Here's my point on that. I can look at his relationship with her and say the outcome. Man, she sure was good for him. He probably wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for this woman, right? His life would be hell if he was. So you judge the relationship and the value of the relationship, the outcome. How's things looking? Okay, here's my point. If Ukraine or Israel are our girlfriend, we ain't been a good, influence on their lives. Judge the outcome. We're here to support. We've got a new girlfriend, like whatever, and it's Ukraine, or the other way around. They got a new girlfriend, and it's the U.S. How do things look in Israel and Ukraine since the U.S. girlfriend has come into their lives? Their generations of people are being wiped out. Both of their economies annihilated. Both the world, the global south is looking at both of them saying, what the hell is that? What a disaster. You know what I mean? So the idea that the U.S. says, I'm standing with Israel or standing with Ukraine, you have created the destruction of both countries. The worst thing that could possibly happen to Ukraine and Israel is their relationship with the United States. Scott.
No, I mean you're 100% correct. I don't, we can blame, and I do. I blame the Ukrainian government. I blame the Israeli government. But we have to be honest. Both are creations of the United States. both would not exist without the United States. There's something inherently wrong with us collectively as a people that allows us to always pick the worst in society and promote them as being the best. And let's look at Ukraine. Ukraine is a direct result of a program run by the CIA since 1948 that breathed life into Ukrainian nationalism. The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Stepan Bandera, and others. Why? Because we wanted something that undermined the Soviet Union, Soviet authority. But look at what I just said. We wanted something that undermined. Now we'll use these. These are academic terms, to undermine, to subvert. But what tools did the nationalists use? Murder, rape. That's it. That's all they know how to do. They murder and they rape. I mean, some of the stories, I'll just give you an example of one that I want everybody to reflect upon when next time you talk about, the noble Ukrainian people. There's a village, I think it was Adamy, Adamy, populated by Poles, that Bandera's thugs decided they were going to go and depopulate. As they went from house to house, and what they did to the people in there is graphically portrayed. Literally ripping living babies apart in front of their mother, ripping a living baby apart in front of their mother, disemboweling the mother in front of the father, and then slowly cutting the father into small pieces, preserving his life as long as possible to preserve the horror and the pain. But you didn't want to scare the other people in the village, so they brought in a female choir. Think about this next time you see one of those Ukrainian female choirs up there singing Stepan Bandera is my father, who would sing to drown out the sounds of the screaming, dying people in this. And then they'd move from building to building, repeating this over and over again. This is the government of Ukraine today. Same people, same ideology. Yats, you remember Yats, our man Yats, Victoria Nuland in her infamous phone call. Yats is on record talking about the fact that the Donbass has too many people. There's too many people in the Donbass, and they've become superfluous. They need to be eliminated. Exterminated was the word he used. He's talking about the Russian speakers. They're a problem. You see, there's too many of them. We don't need so many of them. They become inconvenient to our cause. We need to exterminate them because that's the only thing these people know. They only know how to kill. They only know how to rape. They only know how to murder. That's it. That is the Ukrainian solution. Now, we can dress it up all we want. We can put pig on that lipstick, lipstick on that pig, but it's still a pig. The Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian nation is a poisonous, murderous entity that's incompatible with civilized human existence. This is the reality of it. And the Ukrainian people, having sold out or been bought out or turned a blind eye for so long, can't escape the fact that they themselves have been poisoned. So we created this Ukraine. We created it. We can sit there and condemn it, and I do, but it is a creation of the United States. We made it what it is. It could have been a completely different place had we done things differently, picked different people. But we can't, you see, because in order to take on the Russians or the Soviets back then, we don't know how to have a discussion, to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about the world today and how we're going to live, and let's bring an audience in and see who wins the debate. Because we're a little bit concerned about the outcome. Because you create what you are. And if you want to get down to it, all the United States knows how to do is kill, murder, and rape. That's how we interface with the world. If we do anything benevolent, it's not done, out of the goodness of our hearts. It's done because we're trying to control you, to win you over, to suck you in, to make you subordinated to us by creating this guilt complex where you have to align yourself with us because we saved you. That's our relationship with Europe. We're not there because we like the Europeans. They're waking up to that. Emmanuel Macron finally is realizing it. America's not here. They don't care about us. We never have. We have never cared about Europe. We only use Europe for our goals, for our end. Remember Donald Rumsfeld, We wanted to turn Europe into what he called lily pads so that we could hop American forces across around the world to conquer the world. That's it. We don't care. When old Europe started to go, well, we're not too thrilled with this. He said, that's okay. We got new Europe. we got all these idiots in the East. Now they're going to buy into the fake concept of American democracy and freedom and liberty. It's garbage. We don't even do it here at home. I mean, that's the thing. We have this theory that I love. I love the theory of America. I'd like to breathe life into the theory of America. But the reality is so harsh, so bad. We created Ukraine. We created Israel. We made Israel what it is today. We did. We could have changed it. We could have put pressure on it. We didn't have to allow them, for instance, to have nuclear weapons. We should have told them not just no, but hell no. And all along, we could have strangled that pathetic little country economically. But instead, we used them as part of our Cold War strategy to contain and confront the Soviets, this ideological, conflict. And in doing so, we created a beast, this monster. And now what we allowed is that monster, just like with the Ukrainians. When you work with them, they come back to you. They insinuate themselves back into you. There's a reason why there's in Ellenville, New York, there's a hill with 4 statues on it, the Hill of Heroes. Those statues of our Banderists, Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich, are right there side by side. These are guys who literally carried out the crimes I just told you. They're here in America, worshipped as heroes by Americans. Ukrainian Americans send their children to this camp every year to be indoctrinated into this ideology of hate. And then they get out, and because the United States allows it, they infiltrate into academia, into government. This is where you get your Victoria Nulands. The same thing with Israel. We send them off. Why do we let Americans fight in the IDF? Why? Because then they come back and they get into Congress. They come back and they serve in government. When you have an American official say, I am a Zionist, that is immediately disqualified. Because the only statement an American official is allowed to make, or should be allowed to make, is, I am an American. But the moment you say you're a Zionist, you've subordinated what's best for America to this ideology. So we've created these monsters, but now the monsters control us. So we have this trifecta of terror with America at the top, anchored by Ukraine and Israel. And we have now just defined what is the problem in the world today. Because if you eliminate the United States, Israel, and Ukraine, there are no problems in the world anymore. I mean, literally, they're done. Everything else can be resolved. I mean, I guess you have India, Pakistan, but they can talk. You have China, India, but they can talk. China, Taiwan, it's amazing when you take America out of the mix, how important diplomacy becomes. But when you inject America into the mix, it's the military solution. I think we've identified what the problem in the world today is. It's spelled USA.
Here's something I want to throw at you. Here's an article. Russia could ban export of vital resources to the West, according to the deputy prime minister. They include a large list of products that are in high demand on global markets. And if you read down, you find that this possibility was first voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier this month. So now it appears to me that the Russians are going to get serious economically. That a while back, there was some question, what would you do if you were Russian and they fired missiles and this and that? I said, I'd do what I've always felt is the worst thing you can do to people, give them what they want. It's always the worst possible thing. And I'd say to Europe, so you guys are doing everything you can to sanction us, and you want to stop getting oil, you want to stop getting gas and fertilizer and things like that, time to give you what you want. I think Russia is still either number 1 or 2 in gas, in fertilizer, in oil. And all of this anti-Russia stuff, they're still buying a hell of a lot of very important stuff that they could not survive in Europe without Russia. And if I was Russia, I'd say, you guys are trying to destroy me. You get none of that anymore. Oh, by the way, Boeing and Airbus building all those planes, good luck with titanium. Aluminum, well, the market for aluminum ain't going to look so good anymore. And I would say, if you guys are coming to get me, fine. I would say, they've got 1 million sanctions against Russia. If I'm running Russia and it looks like Putin's getting there, that he's going to say, look, all of this stuff. And imagine what happens to the price of these things on the market. And the Russians can say, oh, by the way, we'll still sell them to China at the same price. India, Africa, our friend, they all get them at the same price. Europe, the US, uranium. Oh, by the way, Russia's got 40% of the uranium, and they're very good friends with Niger and Mali and the African countries that have a significant amount. So if, it looks like the time is getting close when countries who have a significant influence on the world and global commodities market are going to make a move. And if Russia makes it, it just wouldn't shock me if China doesn't say, oh yeah, some of these rare earth minerals. The time's coming when the US is going to be slammed head on into the sanctions that it's been imposing on everyone else. And I think it looks like that's coming. Your thoughts on all of that, Scott?
You know, the interesting, I had a debate in another journalistic outlet that I participate in that dealt with oil, and basically the question to be addressed in the debate is about the Russian weaponization of oil, especially with Europe, and my opponent saying you can't do business with Russia because it's not a reliable supplier. That they weaponize it, that at the first possibility they'll cut off oil and all that stuff. And I wrote back and I said, no, Russia is the reason why Russia is one of the world's largest suppliers of energy is because it's a good client, a good customer. I mean, they deliver on their contracts. If Russia signs a contract, Russia adheres to the contract through hell or high water, because that's what a reliable business partner does. And Russia's always examined this not from the how do I screw Europe or America, but how do I retain my standing in the global business community? And so for everybody who's like, well, why does Russia still sell oil to Europe? Especially when Europe's saying we don't want any oil, but they do want it because they have to have it, they need it. Russia sells it for a number of reasons. One, it's a stream of income. But two, imagine if you're not Europe. Imagine if you're India or the Chinese. And your relations with Russia are good, but they're not perfect. There's things you have issues of. And now you've made Russia an important part of your economy, Russian energy, an important part of your economy. And that doesn't matter how much justification Russia can say. Well, we were justified to end this contract, to modify this contractual relationship. From an Indian perspective, you have to say, well, we can't predict the future. And Russia just showed that under certain conditions, these contracts are meaningless. That's bad for Russian business. So I think the Russians bend over backwards to say, we know, I mean, they are shipping ammonia fertilizer through Ukraine. They are transshipping oil through Ukraine. Ukraine gets paid billions of dollars by the Russians. Why? Because contractually, Russia is obligated to fulfill its commitments. And when you sign contracts, they're for multi-years. Just because a war comes up, you don't, it doesn't. First of all, no war has been declared. See, this is the other thing. If a war was declared, then I think we get the force majeure and all this kind of stuff that gets to kick in and the contracts are nullified. But Russia made it a point. Not everybody's like, why didn't Russia declare war? I think I just answered it for you. Because they have contracts that are important. And the contracts are important on a number of levels, economically, reputationally, to secure market share as the rest of the world collapses. I think what Russia has done in adhering to its contractual obligations is raise its stature in the world today. There's a reason why Africa is flocking to do business with Russia, because Russia can be trusted. And Russia doesn't go around and sanction you because you disagree with a policy that has nothing to do with your country or the region. I think when you take a look at the sale of nickel and titanium and stuff, I think one of the reasons why it's taken so long is these contracts, and I have to look into this, may be coming up for renegotiation. Yeah. And at that time, Russia can say, no, we don't want to renegotiate this contract. But Russia has always been very careful about arbitrarily terminating contracts, because then they're as guilty as the United States is in terms of sanctioning and seizing assets, maybe not on the scope and scale, but basically what you're saying is that your word is not your bond, that your word means nothing, that a contract means nothing. Russia is all about treaty relationships, contractual relationships. They want it in writing. They want it down, what your obligations are. The United States has shown that it can't be reliable. This is why another big news that came out this week that nobody's picking up on is Russia said no more arms control discussions with the United States.
Right.
We can't trust you. There's nothing there's nothing you can say that would make us want to do business with you. You're horrible. You violated every treaty. You lied to everybody. You lied to everybody. You remember Michael McFaul when he
yes,
when he
I do,
on that stage, and I forget, was it Mearsheimer that confronted him?
I think
So you lied.
Montreal,
of course we lied. We're big boys, big boy rules. We lie. No, we don't, Michael. It's not the way it's supposed to be, especially diplomats. Diplomats have to tell the truth all the time. The CIA can lie because they're scum-sucking pigs, but the diplomats, your word is your bond. You represent America. You don't have to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. In diplomacy, you're allowed to, not answer a question. You don't have to answer that question. Or you can say, I'll get back to you. Or you can say, this is under consideration. There's a whole bunch of terms out there that you can throw out there to cloud the situation without lying. But when you commit, especially the final product of diplomacy, which is a contract, a treaty, signed, ratified, America has put its weight behind this. And then it turns out that it was all a lie, a ploy. There's a reason why the world doesn't trust us, because we can't be trusted. We stand for nothing, literally nothing. I challenge any God-fearing, patriotic American right now to actually, in a straight face, tell me what America stands for today. What makes you proud of being an American? Right now. I ask myself that question every single day. And the only thing that makes me proud of being an American is the potential of what America could be. But there's nothing about what America does today that makes me proud. Nothing. From how we treat our own people, how we treat our own Constitution, how we interface with the world. There's not a single damn thing that makes me proud of being an American, because we suck. We don't care about ourselves. We don't care about our Constitution. We don't care about the world we live in. I mean, when I say ourselves, we only care about ourselves. We don't care about our fellow Americans. We are abandoning people in need, just like we abandoned them in Hawaii. And every American has to wake up right now and ask themselves, if the world came to an end in my neighborhood, who's going to come to my assistance? And the answer is nobody. They'll give you $750. Yeehaw.
Yeah, that's a fact. Let me ask you this. A town I've been hearing about a lot, Vuhledar. Vuhledar. I can never look at the spelling and what have the W's mean the V's and U. I don't know what the hell. All I know is there's a town that kind of looks like either Vuhledar or Vuhledar, and it seems to have fallen. And it seems to me that that is a critical piece of the Ukrainian front line of defense. Your thoughts on whether or not it's fallen and how important that is, the rate of decline for the Ukraine, how it affects the fall of the Ukrainian defense, which seems to be crumbling.
Well, first of all, Vuhledar, I can mispronounce it just like anybody. And there's a Russian pronunciation, then there's a Ukrainian pronunciation. It is a small urban entity that is located on the battlefield in the Zaporizhia area. As Russia came in the early stages of this conflict, and one of the first things they did is create that land corridor connecting Crimea with the Donbass and Russia. You needed that land corridor to be created. The land corridor, then once it's created, needed to expand. And ideally, it would expand to include all of Zaporizhia, all of Kherson. As the Russians expanded out of Mariupol and moved to the west, Vuhledar was one of the places that they tried to take early on. And you take it, it was an anchor of the Ukrainian defenses in that area. If you take it, the Ukrainians would have to withdraw back further. The Ukrainians held. And I mean, if I'm writing the history of the Ukrainian side of the war, the defense of Vuhledar will go down as one of the classics. I mean, these guys held. They were bombed to death. They were shelled to death. The Russians put a lot of resources into this. They beat back tremendous amount of Russian attacks, inflicted serious casualties on the Russians over time. This was became the anchor of their defense. And basically, as long as Vuhledar held, it made things difficult for the Russians in the Zaporizhia front, and also dictated what Russia could do further, because you always have to think about flank protection, logistics, and things of that nature. So the continued defense of this place became strategic in nature. I know there's a lot of people now that are reinventing history, saying, well, it doesn't matter. It's just a small little village. I mean, if you looked at, let me give you an example from history. The Battle of Waterloo. Okay, Napoleon is going up against Wellington, and he's making the moves. He needs to secure a flank position so he can launch his major attack. There's a farmhouse that's being held by a handful of British riflemen, and he needs to clear that farmhouse so that he can then move forward aggressively against it. Couldn't take the farmhouse. I mean, they took it at the end of the day, but what should have been just a preparatory movement or battle for the big battle became a major focus of effort as the entire French assault stalled, and now they have to launch attack against this farmhouse. And finally, they took the farmhouse, but it's late in the day. They've blown their momentum, etc. Vuhledar is this farmhouse. Vuhledar was this farmhouse. It was you can't pretend it. If you looked at the battlefield before it happened, you'd say that's just a farmhouse. But as the battle unfolded, La Haye Sainte, I think, is the name of the place. I used to study that battle all the time, but it became a critical aspect of the battle for Waterloo, and the reason why Napoleon lost. Vuhledar took on that kind of importance for the Ukrainians. It fell, I think, in a way that isn't going to disrupt the Russians. Meaning the Russians have the resources. This isn't the Waterloo analogy fails at this point because Russia does have the resources to continue and move on, and they will. It's going to be problematic for the Ukrainians because now with the collapse of this, what's behind it? Where are the Ukrainians going to fall back on? And it creates, a level of uncertainty and a level of fluidity. I mean, it held for so long; it was just assumed it was going to hold, and now it didn't. This battle has major consequence. Now, going forward, people will stop talking about this battle, but understand that Vuhledar has anchored the Ukrainian defenses in Zaporizhia for 2 years, and when Russia takes Zaporizhia, and Russia will recapture all of Zaporizhia. The only reason why I was able to do so is because Vuhledar fell. I mean, that's how Vuhledar was the linchpin of the Ukrainian defense of Zaporizhia.
Interesting. Wow. Well, here's another article. This is from TASS. Beijing, Moscow to promote just multipolar world order. And when you go on and they're like, China and Russia will continue to fight for international justice, contribute to building a multipolar world. You go down and they say China and Russia supported each other's presidency in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. China and Russia will continue to actively lead the trend for independence and mutually beneficial cooperation. He emphasized both. Okay, so he goes on. We will firmly promote the victorious achievements of World War II, and work together to facilitate the shaping of the right view of its history. Very interesting thing going on there. It's I read recently that they had this big Ocean 24, which was a large naval exercise. China and Russia both participated. Afterwards, China and Russia started naval patrols together, so they're doing naval patrols together. It just seems to me that China and Russia are rapidly integrating their military resources. I'll leave it at that. And with Iran being on the verge of being possibly attacked, I had heard that Shoigu, who nobody could find, might just be in Iran. And it seems to me that in light of the United States stacking Ukraine with military hardware and technology and space-based targeting assets and intelligence against Russia, that don't get me wrong, I'm not denigrating Iran's ability, but that Russia would likely be of great assistance to Iran in the event of some kind of a clash. Anyway, your thoughts: Iran, Russia, China.
Well, let's look at two things. In World War II, we had the Allies and we had the Axis. The Allies were defined by the United States, Soviet Union, Great Britain, China, France. Those are the big ones. The Axis was Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy. We, being the United States, we focus on the war in Europe. D-Day is one of our big things that we talk about. We all watch the movie Patton, so we understand North Africa and Sicily, and to a lesser extent Italy, because Patton never went into Italy. So we ignore the horrors that was, the landing in Naples, Anzio, Casino, and just the bloody fighting that was done there. But we romanticize that aspect of it. When it comes to the Pacific, it's Pearl Harbor. We always start with Pearl Harbor. We talk a little bit about MacArthur running away. Then we have Guadalcanal. Then we have the island hopping. We finish up with Iwo Jima, the flag raising, Okinawa, and then of course Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the war's over. Sometimes we'll have people talk about Merrill's Marauders. We'll say, well, wait, where were they? They were in Burma. What were they doing in Burma? They're trying to do that Burma-China road. Well, why are we doing that Burma-China road? What? China, huh? And then we'll get into, the Chenault and the what the heck did they call them? The Tigers, the P-40s with the tiger face on it. Yeah. And we talk about that, but even then we're talking about later in the war. We forget that, from 1936, I think that's when the Manchurian Bridge incident took place. China was at war with Japan, and Japan brutally occupied China. The massacre of Nanking, what they did in Shanghai, the slaughter, the use of biological weapons to annihilate the Chinese. I mean, the Japanese were pure evil in the minds of the Chinese. Unforgivable acts were committed by the Japanese. Slaughter, butchering, millions of people dying. Then the war ends. Now, and you're also the Soviets. Remember, the Nazi Germans killed all those Soviet people and, butchered and raped and murdered and all that. War ends. In America, we make good with the Nazis, the Germans. They become part of our NATO alliance. And we make good with the Japanese, especially during the Korean War. We suddenly realized the strategic importance of Japan, and the occupation forces suddenly turned into forces that had to be deployed into Korea. We need to turn Japan into a military base. We need to make good with Japanese. And meanwhile, the Chinese are going, these guys are evil. They didn't change. You left the emperor in place. And now you've allowed all of those industrial companies that were making the weapons that made the Japanese war machine to exist and thrive as under your umbrella. And the same thing, the Russians are looking at the Germans going, wait a minute, these guys committed crimes, and yet you've embraced them and absorbed them and make them one of yours. There's a reason why history matters to the Russians and the Chinese. because they don't want to ever forget the reality that Germany and Japan are in many ways unrepentant. How can I say that? Look at the new prime minister of Japan. He's a warmongering sack of manure. This is a man who believes in the revival of the Japanese empire. He wants the Japanese military to forego its constitutional, restraints about war. He wants the fleet and the rising sun to rise again. And China's going, no, no, and no. We don't forget our history. We know who you are, and you've never apologized. You've never got on your knees. You've never begged for forgiveness because America always protected you. The same thing with the Germans. I don't know how sick I was in my stomach when I watched those two German officers get up on TV with the map of Kursk and talk about this is the second time the German tanks have been in the Kursk area. Yeah, remember the first time you got wiped out, but now gleefully you get to do it again. Working with the same people, by the way, Ukrainian nationalists who fought on alongside Nazi Germany. The Russians and the Chinese don't forget their history. They know their history. We in the West tend to poo-poo it as propaganda. Not just Russian propaganda, it's just Chinese propaganda. Well, ask the Chinese. There's a whole bunch of them. Ask them. They might tell you otherwise. They might tell you that they haven't forgiven, they haven't forgotten, and they're not going to. So this is why I think you see both China and Russia talking about the importance of the history. Never forget the lessons of history. And they understand the danger that exists when the United States coddles an unrepentant Japan, when the United States coddles an unrepentant Germany. And, with Germany, we see the German tanks in Kursk today, and the Germans bragging about it. With Japan, we see them wanting to make their fleet relevant. Japanese ships going through the Strait of Formosa. Formosa, I use that term on purpose to invoke the Japanese occupation of Formosa. Guys, this isn't good. This isn't good. We're heading in the wrong direction. And so the Russians and the Chinese understand this, and they're coming together. And if they do actually come together in a formal military alliance, it's game, set, match. Now, they're unlikely to because there are problems associated with that, problems of history, problems, et cetera. But that, I think we need to, focus on that aspect of it. You had asked a part two to that question. I got so carried away with the
about
history.
Iran and Russia.
Russia and Iran,
S-400s, etc. And let me add this: as we're hearing all of this, Iranian strikes Israeli strikes. Man, if there's S-400s around, you don't want to go flying into Iran with those things around. You're going to get shot down.
Well, I mean, the S-400 isn't a perfect system, but it's a good system. It complicates Israeli strike plans, which were previously only focused on S-300 or S-300 equivalents. But here's the more important thing. Russia, in deploying the S-400, these aren't going to be operated by Iranians. They'll be plugged into the Iranian air defense. But now that means that Russia has now to get plugged into the Iranian air defense and Russian operators are on the ground because they have to train the Iranians. Russia, my understanding, has sent Su-35s to Iran. Iranian pilots are not competent in the Su-35. Russian pilots are. If you go back in history,
add electronic warfare systems too.
Advanced electronic warfare systems. If you go back in history, during the Korean War, Russian pilots flew Chinese and North Korean MiGs. During the Vietnam War, Russian operators were on the ground operating the SA-2 surface-to-air missile systems, and they were flying the North Vietnamese MiGs. Not all of them, but they were flying some. The MiG-21s when they were first introduced. You go to the Yom Kippur War, the War of Attrition. Russian pilots were flying the MiG-21s in the Egyptian Air Force. Throughout history, we see where Russia has sent its forces over. So it's not unthinkable that Russian pilots will be flying Iranian aircraft in the defense of Iran, which means Israel, if it attacks Iran, will be fighting Russians. We saw today Israel launch an attack against a warehouse that was adjacent to the Russian military base in Syria. Early reports said that they had attacked the Russian
Right.
military
Yeah. So
base,
yep. Yep.
but I don't think they did. I think they attacked a warehouse outside of it. But Russian air defense did engage in the defense, because you can't, when missiles are coming in that close, you shoot down those that you deem to be a threat to you. This is a signal by Israel that they're not intimidated by Russia. Vladimir Putin has responded by telling all Russians to leave Israel. There's 1.5 million of them. He said, get out. Why? Lavrov said a little while ago that that Russia is not going to sit on the sidelines as Israel carries out genocide and destabilization. Russia has a historic relationship with Israel because significant number of Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews back in the Soviet times have gone to Israel, and they maintain connectivity with their their relatives who remain behind. And so there's been a close consultation historically between Russia and Israel. But as the Russian UN ambassador said the other day in the Security Council, Israel has become completely intertwined with America. There's no distinguishing the two. And if America is the adversary, so too shall Israel become. And I think Israel is about to find out that in expanding the scope and scale of this conflict in the Middle East, they're going to run head on into Russia. And this will be interesting to see what happens, because it's one thing to have Israel planning an F-15I or an F-35 incursion into Iranian airspace against Iranian pilots flying old F-14s or MiG-29s or things of that nature. It's another thing when you have the Russians bringing their skill set to bear, and what happens when these Israeli aircraft run into Su-35s flown by Russians, directed by Russians, protected by a Russian air defense umbrella. We'll see. But we're moving into a very dangerous phase here, where we could see a Russian-Israeli clash turn into a Russian-American clash, with all that entails. And so, I've been focused, like many others, on Ukraine as the potential flashpoint for, a nuclear Armageddon. But thanks to Israel, we now see the potential for an Israeli-Iranian conflict to spin out of control and become a Russian-American conflict. But even the Israeli-Iranian conflict, I had a conversation with an Iranian, not in the government, but in the know. And I said, from my perspective, the fatwa issued by Ayatollah Khomeini and backed by Khamenei, that nuclear weapons are forbidden under Islam, still exists. But I said, studying, Iranian marja and studying the way the Shia faith works, and how as you become an Ayatollah and you create your marja, you're one of the things you have to do is publish your interpretation of a religious notion, how it's impacted by modern times. And the whole concept of the Shia faith is that it adapts to the present reality. For instance, there's technologies today that didn't exist back when Muhammad walked the earth, and so Muhammad's words don't directly apply. So therefore, how do you apply the principles of Muhammad to modern times? And the thing about the marja is that it's sort of democratic based, meaning if you're an Ayatollah and you create your marja and you come up with something to say, women can only wear 15 layers of black woolen clothing in the summer. And the Iranian people go, no, they just don't attend that marja. They go to the guy that says, the hijab can, they go, okay, we'll buy into this one. And now you wilt, and then the theocracy goes, you failed. You were given your shot. You failed. The reason why I bring this up is, if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear infrastructure, understand this, it won't destroy it. A significant element, the most critical elements, are buried deep underground, and they are duplicated. These are the elements that can take 60% enriched uranium and turn it into 98% enriched uranium in a very, very short period of time. I believe it's also hidden in underground is the ability to turn that enriched uranium into metal, shape that metal, and use it as the fissile core of a nuclear device. A nuclear device which has been designed from the get-go to fit on the missiles that can hit Israel anytime they want to, anywhere they want to. Israel has talked about, maybe using nuclear weapons as part of the Samson option. If Israel gets into a direct existential conflict, because if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear infrastructure, it's now said this is a life and death struggle with Iran. Iran, I believe there will be a new fatwa issued. They won't go public with it, but the supreme leader will say, go forth. And I think in 2 weeks' time, they'll have 5 nuclear weapons loaded on Fatah 1, Fatah 2 missiles. And 5's all you need to eliminate Israel forever. There will be no Israel left. That's the direction we're heading here. That's literally the direction we're heading here. So for everybody who's out there cheering Israel on, understand this. You're simply cheering the total destruction of Israel. Israel's not going to win this war. That's the reality. They're not going to win it conventionally, and they're not going to win it by threatening nuclear conflict. Nuclear war will be the end of Israel. Now, that doesn't mean that Israel isn't going to hurt a whole bunch of other people. Of course they will. But it'll be the end of Israel. And for those of you who say, I stand with Israel, please go stand with them physically so that we're done with you too. Because that's what the outcome will be. This is a very dangerous period of time that we all live in. And we should take nothing for granted, especially our government, which has shown under the Biden administration a total inability to appreciate this because it has been so thoroughly infiltrated with Ukrainian nationalists and pro-Israeli Zionists that it no longer functions in a manner that preserves and protects America, what America is.
And I'll say this, add this to it. One of the things the Iranians have threatened to do is strike the Israeli infrastructure. If you understand Israel, you take out a couple of electric and water. It's not a big country. Doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, right? Iran could take out, without large massacres, without some huge exchange, just with very targeted, precisely targeted strikes, could really do what the U.S. always threatens to do. We'll bomb you back to the Stone Age. Fact of the matter is this: if they say we're taking out certain number of electric, water, etc., they would eliminate Israel's ability to really continue any war at all, continue anything at all. The people in Israel would say, holy crap, we got no electricity. How long is it going to take to rebuild this or that or whatever? Well, we can maybe do it in a year or two, provided that Iran doesn't blow those back up as soon as we get started working. You know what I'm saying? Number one. Number two, Iran has the ability to eliminate the oil infrastructure in the region, which would put us back to the Stone Age. So for all of the talk about putting people back to the Stone Age that the U.S. has been doing in a relatively brief amount of time, without catastrophic human loss, Iran has the capability to put Israel and the entire West back to the Stone Age. And I think that's something that people don't really grasp.
Ask yourself this. For instance, Russia's been hitting Ukraine's energy production infrastructure. And Ukraine has responded by receiving equipment to rebuild, but also its neighbors in Europe have been providing electricity to Ukraine. Now, some of them are starting to shut it off because they say they need it. Which of Israel's neighbors are going to divert their energy grid to Israel? No one. So this is what the Israelis have to understand. You can't posture as if you're a superpower when the foundation you're standing on is made out of balsa wood. And the Iranians have said infrastructure. I mean, that's what they focused on. Their next step wasn't to terrorize the Israeli population or to take out the government. The Iranians are so much smarter than we give them credit for, and they're so much more sophisticated than we give them credit for. By targeting the Israeli infrastructure, they will in effect kill Israel. And They'll do it without killing Israelis. Once Israel become incompatible with modern life, millions of Israelis will flee that country. And when you drop demographically, when you drop the number of Israelis down from 9 million to say 5 million down to 4 million, the concept of a Jewish homeland is no longer viable because the percentage is, it doesn't work anymore. So, and the interesting thing about Iran is they didn't choose to do that. They are giving Israel a chance, which means Iran's ultimate goal isn't the death of Israel. Iran's ultimate goal is peace and stability, inclusive of Israel. But they'd like to see a Palestinian state. Things of that nature. But this concept that the Ayatollah wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, if that's what he wanted, he would have done it. Israel wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth because ultimately, if that decision's made, it's going to be because the Israeli government provoked it, knowing what the consequences of it would be. No one can say the Israeli government hasn't been put on notice as what will happen if they go forward.
Scott Ritter. Don't forget, everybody, go to scottritter.com. That's his website. That's where all his good work is going on. You can follow everything there. And also, don't forget, when you go there, make sure that you donate. Share scottritter.com on all your social media platforms, and put a little note up also with people to donate. Scott's doing a lot of work. He does traveling. He's got to buy equipment. He's got a lot to do, and he needs us to contribute to help all of that. Scott's, not a prideful guy. He's not going to ask you, but I am. He provides all of his stuff for free. He, doesn't charge. I mean, it's fantastic. But that being said, it's up to us to help Scott to, continue to be able to be economically viable for him and his family while he continues to work hard for peace and stability in the world. scottritter.com. Don't forget, follow Scott on Telegram also. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. By the way, share this, since both Scott and I are either banned or shadow banned all over social media. Make sure. Yeah, I was looking the other day, Scott, and I went like a year ago on YouTube, and I started looking at like the show I did with you, 81,000 views. I look at it now, 23,000 views. Yeah. I looked at my monthlies, right? 580,000 views. I look at it now, 250. It's cut more than in half. I'm looking at a bunch of like a week shows a year ago, and it was like 30,000 views, 28,000 views, 41,000 views. Now I look at it, 7,500 views, 10,000 views, maybe 13 or 15. And I saw Jimmy Dore the other day doing one where he showed something that he did, and he says, in the past, I get 90,000 views in a bowl. He looked at it, 23,000 views. So clearly, particularly in light of the election, they're cutting everybody back. They're doing everything they can to keep voices that would be damaging to the neocon ideology quiet. But we're going to keep doing our thing, and it's up to you to help to amplify these voices. So everybody, please like, share, subscribe on all of your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. We're out.